rotten, worm-eaten, more riddled with holes than a honeycomb, with 3 pumps, pots and kettles, and with all hands working, they could not keep the water down which came into the ship, and there was no other remedy for the havoc the worm had wrought. My ship was sinking under me. This was Christopher Columbus in 1502. This amazing, amazing creature, which he called a worm, sunk his ship and left him stranded in Jamaica for an entire year. So, shipmasters and explorers thought they could combat the worm by wrapping their ships in copper. This was after the Spanish Armada, not actually sunk by the British Navy, as I'll have you believe, but by the same shipworm. In the 1700s, they thought they would repel the shipworm, and this is how they talked about it. The vessel, through her mast, be firm. Beneath her copper bears a worm. Far from New England's blustering shore, New England's worm her hulk shall bore, and sink her in the Indian seas. This is called the worm that sank 1,000 ships, and it has played a critical part of Western history. But it's played a more important role in the history of the Cabrogal people. Before I share my history of this, I'd like to remind the audience that Western cultures have spent 400 years trying to kill this worm with antiphallants, with copper, which has not only killed the worm, it's also polluted our marine environment to levels of critical water quality issues in many of the harbours around the world, including our own Sydney Harbour. And this brings pain to my heart for a number of reasons. Not everyone saw the challenge of the shipworm as being negative, though. Who's been in the tunnels of London, in the London Underground? You have been in my tunnel. For Mark Islamabad Brunel saw the challenge of digging this tunnel under the River Thames. The government had brought in thousands of Cornish miners to try and achieve this magnificent engineering feat of boring under the greatest river in London, only to have the wet sand continuously collapsing on top of them. Mark, who'd worked in a shipyard, had a certain fascination with the shipworm, and he had seen its jaw covered in shells, almost like a little drill, protecting its smooth and squishy body. And he thought, I could replicate that, and let's see how good it is boring under the River Thames. And there you are. You have the world's first engineering solution brought to you by a shipworm. Here's my shipworm. Why is it my shipworm? It's not actually a worm, it's a mollusk. And in our native tongue, the tongue of the Darug-speaking nations of the Sydney Basin, and my own namesake, the Cabrogal, are named after Cobra, who you know as shipworm now. When I first discovered my totem, my elders so generously shared the importance of Cobra with me. Not only is it our people's namesake, but if you have been to Cabramatta in the Sydney Basin, Cabramatta is a Darug word, or kind of, I guess you can call it the buggerisation of a Cabrogal word, which means the place in the water where the cobra grub are. And the Cabrogal people, Cabrogal means people of the cobra grub, and I am Cabrogalian, which means a woman of the people of the cobra grub. Why is this our totem? When I was introduced to my totem, I was really excited. I thought, it's going to be a whale, it's going to be an amazing eagle, it could be an emu, I'd be happy with a possum. And then I was confronted with probably the ugliest creature that you've ever seen. And what does it do? It is actually called the termite of the sea. It has spent its lifetime, about 500 million years, boring through every kind of timber that it could find. It wreaked havoc on navies. It wreaks havoc on wharfs. You may see it wash up on the beaches of the Sydney Basin, having burrowed through all the driftwood. It loves timber. So it is an important animal though, and my elders said to me with no uncertain terms, do not ever diss your totem. There is a very good reason why thousands of generations of your people have cared for this species. We know it not as a borer or as a destructor or as a villain in the history of humanity. We know it as a saviour. And this is recorded when Watkin Tench paddled up my river, the Georges River, and noticed hundreds of Darug people dying or deceased on the banks of the riverbed, infected with smallpox. And he wrote in his journal, I came across a man and his son, and they were so frightened by us that they left the delicacies of their stomach on the beach. What he observed in the vomit was this worm. And they looked at us and thought that we were just eating that as a food. It's an incredible medicine, and our people have known this as a medicine since time began. Because not only is it tasty, some cultures around the world make a clam chowder out of this. It has an incredible symbiotic relationship with an organism that produces antibiotics. Our people were consuming as much of this worm as we could as smallpox swept through our population in the Sydney Basin, only knowing this as a medicine. Now, smallpox is a virus, so this would have been completely ineffective to my ancestors in ridding their bodies of the smallpox, but it is incredibly effective as an antimicrobial and antibacterial. In fact, these are my people, the Cabrogal people as drawn in there. We were often put as caricatures in the history of this country, as you can see, not acknowledging our deep, deep connection to science, technology, engineering and maths, and our deep insight into this beautiful, incredible mollusk. This is Acinetobacter. It is already becoming drug resistant. And recent studies of my totem have killed this incredibly devastating bacteria, and this beautiful, beautiful mollusk may save humanity. I think if we look back into our First Nations knowledge systems about the incredibly vast and important species that we have on country, many of the plants and animals and soils and waterways that we have will contribute to actually saving the human species in a time of climate change. So I wanted to share a little about how we can look forward and backward to help us understand a little more about co-designing and being in partnership with nature rather than seeing it as a problem and trying to kill it. Yano.
Thank you.